certain that the Lord is the ultimate sanctioning officer, and we must therefore dedicate our attempts to the mercy of the Lord for ultimate success or to get rid of the obstacles on the path of success. Okay, so we know this famous verse by Prahlad Maharaj, a person could drown. So, yeah, so there the word comes upekshitam, correct? If the Lord neglects, then it's not possible. So therefore, the sanction of the Lord has to be there. And therefore, it is important that one attract the mercy of the Lord by one's activities. We must therefore dedicate our attempts to the mercy of the Lord for ultimate success or to get rid of the obstacles on the path of success. So you see, this point keeps repeating again and again. This is the path of bhakti. Bhakti means dependent on mercy. This is the distinguishing factor between bhakti and all the other process. Other process, they think by my efforts I will do it. By my efforts I will get liberation. So everything is by my efforts. And therefore they fail sometimes. But on the path of bhakti, therefore humility is so important. So we know Srila Bhakti Thakur said, regarding the Trinadapi verse, what he said? String it around the neck, on the thread of the holy name. So, and of course, yes, that's also correct. Yes, he said, this is our Siddha Pranali mantra, to attain Siddhi, to attain perfection. This is our mantra. Because when one is humble, then one will feel dependent on the mercy. Then one will take shelter. Then one will surrender. So this all will happen when one thinks, on my own, nothing is going to happen. And therefore you find throughout the Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, you find everywhere you find these exalted devotees totally dependent on the mercy of the Lord. Further down he says, we should therefore learn to dedicate our activities unto the mercy of the Lord and accept Him either as impersonal Brahman, Lokalash Paramatma, or the Supreme Personality of God. It does not matter what one is. One must dedicate everything in the service of the Lord. If one is a learned scholar, scientist, philosopher, poet, etc., then he should employ his learning to establish the supremacy of the Lord. If one is administrator, stays the Lord, as Sri Arjuna did. Similarly, if one is a businessman, industrialist, agriculturalist, etc., then one should spend his hard-earned money for the cause of the Lord. So Prabhupada is giving practical ways how one can dedicate oneself to the service of the Lord. Think always that the money which is accumulated is the wealth of the Lord. The best thing is, after all, to get relief from all material activities and engage oneself completely in hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord. But in case of the absence of such an opportunity, okay, so he says the best thing is engage oneself completely in hearing. But in the case of absence of such an opportunity, one should try to engage in the service of the Lord, everything for which one has specific attraction. And that is the way of peace and prosperity. The word samsuchitam in this stanza is also significant. One should not think for a moment that the realization of Narada was childish imagination only. It is not like that. It is so realized with expert and erudite scholars, and that is the real import of the word samsuchitam. And in the next verse is giving an example. O good soul, okay, let's read the verse. Amayo yascha bhutanam jayate yena suvatra tadeva hi amayam dravyam na punati chititsitam. O good soul, does not a thing applied therapeutically cure a disease which was caused by that very same thing? So here Prabhupada gives the example of the milk and curds. So the disease caused by milk can be cured by another substance, which is a transformation of the milk. So similarly, material activities are binding, but the same material activities, when used in the service of the Lord, little transformation is required. What is the transformation? Consciousness. Only change in consciousness. So if there's a change in consciousness, one does the same activity for the pleasure of the Lord, then that very same activity will be the cause of liberation. So therefore, Prabhupada writes further down, the best way to make the best use of a bad bargain is to use everything in relation with the Supreme Spiritual Being. Everything is an emanation from the Supreme Spirit, and by His inconceivable power, He can convert spirit into matter and matter into spirit. Therefore, a material thing, in brackets, Prabhupada writes so-called. Why so-called? Yes, from one viewpoint, everything is spiritual because everything is coming from the Lord, is at once turned into a spiritual force by the great will of the Lord. The necessary condition for such a change is to employ so-called matter in the service of the Spirit. That is the way to treat our material diseases and elevate ourselves to the spiritual plane where there is no misery, no lamentation, and no fear. Later on this verse comes, Yasyam vai shruyamanayam Krishne paramapurushe bhaktir utpatite pumsa shoka moho bhaya apaha. When everything is thus employed in the service of the Lord, we can experience that there is nothing except the Supreme Brahman. The Vedic mantra that everything is Brahman, Sarvam Khalu Idam Brahma, is thus realized by us. 34. Evam Rinam Kriya Yoga Sarve Samsmriti Hetava Ta Evatma Vinashaya Kalpante Kalpita Pare. Thus, when all a man's activities are dedicated to the service of the Lord, those very activities which caused his perpetual bondage become the destroyer of the tree of work. Okay, read this purport. It's a nice one.
Fruitive work which had perpetually engaged the living being is compared to the banyan tree in the Bhagavad Gita, for it is certainly very deeply rooted. As long as the propensity for enjoying the fruit of work is there, one has to continue the transmigration of the soul from one body or place to another according to one's nature of work. The propensity for enjoyment may be turned into the desire for serving the mission of the Lord. By doing so, one's activity is changed into Karma Yoga, or the way by which one can attain a spiritual perfection while engaging in the work for which he has a natural tendency.
Okay, so this is basically Karma Yoga, engaging the work for which one has a natural tendency. So that's basically Varnashram. So one has a natural tendency for certain work, one engages in that work, but at the same time one sacrifices the fruits of the work for the Lord. Continue.
Here, the word Atma indicates the categories of all fruitive work. The conclusion is that when the result of all fruitive and other work is dovetailed with the service of the Lord, it will cease to generate further karma and will gradually develop into transcendental devotional service, which will not only cut off completely the root of the banyan tree of work, but will also carry the performer to the lotus feet of the Lord. The summary is that one has to first of all seek the association of pure devotees who not only are learned in the Vedanta but are self-realized souls and unalloyed devotees of Lord Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. In that association, the neophyte devotees must render loving service physically and mentally without reservation. This service attitude will induce the great souls to be more favorable in bestowing their mercy, which injects the neophyte with all the transcendental qualities of the pure devotees. Gradually, this is developed into a strong attachment to hearing the transcendental pastimes of the Lord, which makes him able to catch up the constitutional position of the gross and subtle bodies, and beyond them the knowledge of the pure soul and his eternal relationship with the Supreme Soul, the personality of Godhead. After the relation is ascertained by establishment of the eternal relation, pure devotional service to the Lord begins gradually developing into perfect knowledge of the personality of Godhead beyond the pure view of impersonal Brahman and localized Paramatma. By such Purushottama Yoga, as it is stated in the Bhagavad Gita, one is made perfect even during the present corporeal existence, and one exhibits all the good qualities of the Lord to the highest percentage. Such is the gradual development by association of pure devotees.
So, a very beautiful summary of the entire pastime Prabhupada and the basic lessons from the pastime Prabhupada is given here in this paragraph. The summary is that. So, first of all, one has to seek association of the pure devotees. And what one has to do in that association? The neophyte devotees must, this is every word is important here, must render loving service physically and mentally without reservation. Somebody would like to give a purport here?
With proper consciousness.
Okay, it basically means with proper consciousness. Further, somebody like to elaborate? Every word can be elaborated. Loving service physically and mentally without reservation. Yes, Kunal.
Without any personal motive, we should serve the spiritual master through all, what did you say, body, mind, and senses.
Okay, engaging without motives, body, mind, and senses. Yes, good point.
Serving personally means there will be, then if somebody is serving personally, then there will be 6 exchanges. What mention is in that?
Okay, the 6 exchanges. Okay, that's also correct.
It is like our service will be like ahetukya pratihata, continuous and unmotivated.
Okay, that's correct. Ahetuki apratihata. So loving service means selfless for the pleasure of the beloved only. That's the meaning of love. So one is not thinking about oneself, what will please me. No. One is only thinking about what will please the beloved. I think so. I told this past time, or you might have heard this past time definitely before. So when in a public Mandal program, where was it? I don't know. Somewhere. There was a man challenged Srila Prabhupada. So, why are you trying to convert these Christians into Hindus? Why don't you go and preach in the Muslim countries? Man challenged. So Prabhupada said, oh, you're challenging? Okay. Prabhupada took up the challenge. Yes. And immediately he called Brahmanand Prabhu and Gargmuni Prabhu. He sent Brahmanand Prabhu to Pakistan, Gargmuni Prabhu to Bangladesh. So Brahmanand Prabhu, he didn't have any money So he came to New York. From New York to Pakistan, he hitchhiked. He hitchhiked from New York to Pakistan. Huh? What's that?
They are asking the meaning of the word hitchhiking meaning.
Hitchhiking means so just like you stand on the road, you'll raise your hand for a lift, somebody gives a lift, then he drops you somewhere else, then there you catch hold of somebody else, like that.
Crossing the ocean. Camel migrating to
So whatever, begging here and there, getting some money, crossing, whatever. So that is the point. That's how he reached Pakistan. No, that of course, that. No, from America to come to these countries is easy. Of course, it said that Gargmani Prabhu had money, so he went by flight to Bangladesh. But this is how Brahmananda Prabhu came. And so there was no second thought. And that was 1971. You know what was happening in 1971?
Wow.
Yes, India-Pakistan war. War was going on. The whole situation was so tense. But these devotees were so surrendered. They didn't ask a second question. I mean, I can't even imagine. You know, when everything is going perfectly all right, we are told do some service, we ask 10 questions. What about this? What about that? Ye milega, wo milega. So many things we ask. Just see. Such a totally challenging situation. Totally can't imagine. But not a second thought, not a second word. It's not that Brahmananda Prabhu wrote back to Prabhupada or sent a telegram saying, please send some money. Nothing. There was one more devotee, he took one more devotee, and these two devotees went to Bangladesh, 2 devotees came to Pakistan. And then in Pakistan, what was the situation? It was so hostile. So they were trying to do kirtan on the streets. It said these people would rub the tilak off and spit on their face. That was the situation. Just imagine. They were beating them, spitting on them, whatnots. And then there was a newspaper article which said that 4 Hare Krishnas have been killed in Pakistan. So Prabhupada got that newspaper article in Bombay, and Prabhupada was so worried. So he was thinking 4 means 2 here, 2 there. So he was thinking, oh, what happened? These devotees have been killed or what? And at that time, Brahmananda Prabhu is so frustrated over there. Now he tried whatever they could. They tried their best, but it was such a horrible situation. Then finally he wrote to Prabhupada, can I come back? He sent a telegram. And Prabhupada replied back, come back immediately. Brahman Prabhu says that was the greatest relief for him. And immediately came, and when Brahmananda Prabhu reached Mumbai, here, Prabhupada was in Mumbai at that time, Juhu. Prabhupada embraced Brahmananda. And he says that Prabhupada, just like a mother, Prabhupada was actually in tears. He embraced him with tears in his eyes. And says, just like a mother seeing that, just to check whether the child has been injured somewhere, Prabhupada was sort of patting Brahmanapru and seeing whether everything is okay. But can't imagine such a level of surrender. Can't imagine. So that is the glory of these disciples of Srila Prabhupada. That was the love they had for him. Totally unconditional love. That is love. Without reservation, physically, mentally, at all levels. Just sold out. So, now that's the epitome of this statement Prabhupada is writing here. The neophyte devotees must render loving service physically and mentally without reservation. So that gives us some glimpse of what it means to render service with love, totally, without reservation. Absolutely. So, now, and of course we all know the story of Yamuna Mataji and the rice on the train. So then, what is the result of such service? This service attitude will induce the great souls to be more favorable in bestowing their mercy. And that's what we were discussing in the morning also today. Madhavendra Puri and Ishwar Puri. So when one has that type of service attitude, what happens? Mercy flows. And that's how so many of Srila Prabhupada's disciples in such a short time, even though they came from apparently very degraded backgrounds, but still within such a short time, they made such rapid progress. The only reason is this, because they were ready to surrender without reservation. Actually, there are so many stories like this, we can't even imagine. Preaching in the communist countries. Harikesh Prabhu, I don't know if you heard of Harikesh Prabhu. So Harikesh Prabhu, one thing is what happened in Russia. So one thing is Russia. He went to Russia to preach, and they were literally behind them. And finally they caught him. Long story. But how he was trying to flee from the KGB from one place to the other, but finally they caught him. They caught him and they sent him out of Russia. And he describes that when his plane took off. When his plane took off, he saw that there was a KGB plane parallelly flying. That was how suspicious they were. Now, what can happen in the air? But even in the air, they were following this plane. So he describes, for some time they followed and then they went back. And then this Harikesh Prabhu, he describes his preaching in communist Germany, East Germany. West Germany was democratic, East Germany was communist. There was the Berlin Wall. So he talks about it. I could not even understand how did they manage those things. Now across the border, they took books, proper books. They took books in a van, and he explains that strategy, what they used. He describes how. Actually, I didn't even understand it fully to describe it. They had one empty van on the other side. The van came and they got the books across, and then as soon as they got the books across, they immediately put the books in the other van. Amazing strategies. And then he describes, so he was saying that the communist people were following him. So at the border, so just to avoid their attention, he was trying to hide. He went into a restaurant, and even when he was in the restaurant, then they were, from a distance, they were watching. And they had suspicion. They were watching. And then, somehow when they are inattentive, he gets into the van and speeds off. This is all happening at night. And then he goes to a devotee's house, and so at night he calls out to that other devotee who's staying in that house, and then from down, these boxes of books. Maybe some of you have experience of lifting them sometime. Are they very light? And I don't know if you've seen Harikesh Prabhu. He's very tall, but he's very thin. So from down to, I think he was saying, second floor of a building, he was throwing those boxes. So he says, I also don't know from where I got the strength. But that's how he was throwing those boxes. There was no time. There was no time for them to go by staircase or lift. Just throwing. Just threw those boxes there and fled. And that's how they managed. Incredible stories. How preaching started all over the world. Such sacrifice has gone behind. Now we are peacefully enjoying here. But what sacrifice has gone behind the spreading of ISKCON throughout the world is unimaginable. There is this first devotee who went to South Africa to preach. Huh? No. There is this devotee who stays in Vrindavan now. Huh? What's that? Yes, Shuddhi Prabhu. Yes, Shuddhi Prabhu. Very nice devotee. So, there also in South Africa, in none of these places devotees were allowed to preach. And so at that time there was the European government in South Africa. There was so much of discrimination between whites and blacks and all that. And he had to literally run for his life over there. And they had a policy that if they found someone who was not following their rules and regulations, they would take him. They would take them to some 11-story building and throw them off. So they threatened him. They took him there and threatened him. And then fortunately he had his mother who was a lawyer, and he got her involved. But then he was, they tried to kill him. He hid under a bed in a room for several hours. Can't imagine. And that time, these devotees were alone, they were going to preach. Practically alone. So anyways, so like that, these are all some very small glimpses of the sacrifice that has gone behind the spreading of this movement. So much of sacrifice. Literally, people have given their blood, their very bodies have given up totally. So therefore, these Srila Prabhupada's disciples, even though we may see them as being very simple, may not be very scholarly and things like that, but the amount of surrender and what they have sacrificed at such a young age. What was their age? Most of them in their 20s, or some of them even less than that, in their teens. But they sacrificed just for Srila Prabhupada. And so, then obviously Srila Prabhupada will reciprocate with them. Whatever be their position now. But the amount of sacrifice they made, Srila Prabhupada will reciprocate. So the point here is that when that service attitude is there, this service attitude will induce the great souls to be more favorable in bestowing their mercy. And what happens as a result of that? Which injects the neophytes with all the transcendental qualities of the pure devotees. So then one gets all the wonderful qualities because one gets purified by that mercy. So that is what we were discussing. So one thing is to go by the apprenticeship of sadhana bhakti, which is definitely required. But then, if somehow one attracts the mercy of the pure devotee by sincere service attitude, as Prabhupada is writing here, by the service attitudes. So the point is, that means the apprenticeship, the sadhana bhakti we are doing, that is fine and that's good and that's necessary. But it should be done in such a way that the Vaishnavas are pleased, the spiritual master is pleased. So it should attract the grace. And not simply in a mechanical way, theek hai, kuch to chal raha hai. But then, so that's the meaning of the service attitude. And then once one gets that mercy, one gets the transcendental qualities, and then gradually then one that develops into strong attachments. So then one progresses on the path of bhakti. Ruchi, asakti, bhava, prema, so all that takes place. Okay. Such is the gradual development by association of pure devotees. And so he says, by such Purushottam Yoga, as it is stated in Bhagavad Gita, one is made perfect even during the present corporeal existence. That means even when one is having the body right now, and one exhibits all the good qualities of the Lord. Text 35. Yadatre kriyate karma bhagavat paritoshanam jnanam yattadadhinam hi bhakti yoga samanvitam. Whatever work is done here in this life for the satisfaction of the mission of the Lord is called bhakti yoga, or transcendental loving service to the Lord. And what is called knowledge becomes a concomitant factor. So, in this way, when one performs this karma, bhagavat paritoshanam. Okay? So, paritoshanam means what? Satisfaction. Satisfaction of the Lord. So, when one performs devotional service for the satisfaction of the Lord, then the result will be jnanam. Jnanam Bhakti Yoga Samanvitam. So as we already discussed, Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yoga Prayojita Janyatya Shuvairagyam Jnanam Chaya Ayakam. So as Prabhupada writes, Bhakti Yoga is independent of Jnana or Karma. On the other hand, Jnana and Karma are dependent on Bhakti Yoga. This Kriya Yoga or Karma Yoga, as recommended by Sri Narad to Vyasa, is specifically recommended because the principle is to satisfy the Lord. The Lord does not want his sons, the living beings, to suffer threefold miseries of life. He desires that all of them come to him and live with him. But going back to God, it means that one must purify himself from material infections. When work is performed, therefore, to satisfy the Lord. So that's the important point, to satisfy the Lord. Paritoshana. The performer becomes gradually purified from the material affection. This purification means attainment of spiritual knowledge. So when the purification takes place, then this knowledge which is within the soul, Sat Chit Ananda, the knowledge of the soul becomes manifest. So that's how purification leads to spiritual knowledge. Therefore, knowledge is dependent on karma or work done on behalf of the Lord. Other knowledge being devoid of bhakti, yoga or satisfaction of the Lord cannot lead one back to the kingdom of God, which means that it cannot even offer salvation, as already explained. Nishkarma. Okay, 36. Kurvana yatra karmani bhagavad shikshaya sakrit grunanti gunanamani krishnasyanusmaranti cha. While performing duties according to the order of Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one constantly remembers him, his name and his quality. So as one is working for Krishna, Krishnasya constantly, anusmaranti. And Prabhupada makes the statement which he has written in many places. An expert devotee of the Lord can mold his life in such a way that while performing all kinds of duties either for this or the next life, he can constantly remember the Lord's name, fame, qualities, etc. In every sphere of life, the Lord should be situated as the proprietor. And then Prabhupada, the rest of the purport, Prabhupada gives down-to-earth practical things of how one can engage all one's activities in Krishna's service. So he's talking about business. So if we are doing some business, we must consider that the result of all activities must be given out to the Supreme Enjoyer, Lord Krishna. And then he says in the next paragraph, the major portion of a monetary income, not less than 50%. In this paragraph, Prabhupada writes this 50% at least 3-4 times. Not less than 50% must be spent to carry out the order of Lord Krishna. Not only should we give the profit of our earning to this cause, but we must also arrange to preach this cult of devotion to others. Because that is also one of the orders of the Lord. So many times devotees ask this question about this 50%. Now this is my understanding from the statement of Prabhupada. So many times devotees ask, especially Grihastha devotees, so what is that 50%? Let's hear from some of you. What is your understanding of 50%?
If you get 100 rupees, 50 rupees.
Okay, that is very simple. But that is not so easy, isn't it? Then people will say, okay, if I'm earning 100 rupees, I give 50 rupees. Then what about all my expenditures and this and that?
25.
Huh?
Yeah, I heard that 50% means whatever Krishna consciousness activity we are doing at home also. That also including 50%.
Okay. What I understand here, Prabhupada is saying, not only should we give the profit of our earning to this. The Prabhupada is saying profit of our earning. Profit means what is excess, isn't it? That's my understanding, I don't know.
50% in the profit.
So, that's give the profit of our earning means seems to be like after our our basic minimum expenditure. Profit means what is excess, no? So that means we have a grihastha may have his household expenditure and basic expenditure for Krishna's service. Then what remains from that? Seems to be. Anyway. Ultimately, of course, everyone according to his capacity. Okay. But also preach. And give one message of the word that was preached. Therefore, the attempt must go on to convert unwilling men to become his devotees. Interesting point. Convert unwilling men to become his devotees. There's one conversation, one devotee is asking Srila Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada, we're trying to preach, but these people are not interested. So difficult to preach. So Prabhupada says, if they're already interested, then what you'll preach? So because they're not interested, therefore you have to preach. Otherwise, what is the preaching required for? So that's what Prabhupada is writing here. Convert unwilling men to become devotees. That is preaching. Not that people are just walking inside and becoming devotees, that's easy. They themselves are becoming devotees, but then what's the value of the preaching then? So preaching means to convert unwilling men to become devotees. And Lord Chaitanya has taught a very simple method in this connection. He has taught the lesson for preaching the transcendental message through singing, dancing, refreshment. So this is preaching. Singing, dancing, refreshment. And then again he says, as such, 50% of our income may be spent for this purpose. Then again he says, in this fallen age of quarrel and dissension, if only the leading and wealthy persons of society agree to spend 50% of their income in the service of the truth. As it is taught by Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, there is absolute certainty. You see Prabhupada's confidence? There is absolute certainty of converting this hell of pandemonium to the transcendental abode of the Lord. So the situation is what? Hell. It is hell. Hell of pandemonium. Not pandemic. Of course, pandemic is part of it. Pandemonium means it's... what's the exact... see the dictionary meaning? Pandemonium. What's the exact meaning? Prabhupada use amazing language. Hell of pandemonium.
Wild and noisy disorder or confusion.
Wild and noisy. Yes, that's the situation of the world now. Rupa. Converting this hell of pandemonium to the transcendental abode of the Lord. And again he writes, no one will disagree to partake in a function where good singing, dancing and refreshment are administered. Everyone attends such a function. Therefore, Prabhupada stressed very much on these activities, singing, dancing, prasad. For the new people especially. For the new people, that is what is required. There is one conversation in Hyderabad where, again, these are very early days, devotees are struggling. But somehow the quality of prasadam was not good. And Prabhupada is just so heavy. You should hear that conversation. Prabhupada is saying, what food? Dog's food. Even dogs will not eat. So heavy Prabhupada. Feed them good prasad. Then they will come. That devotee is saying, Prabhupada, here in South India, they want spicy food. Prabhupada saying, do anything. Whatever they want, feed them. But they should come. Very interesting. And then he says, this alone will help the attendant associate with the Lord and thereby purify himself in spiritual realization. The only condition for successfully executing such spiritual activities is that they must be conducted under the guidance of a pure devotee who is completely free from all mundane desires, fruitive activities, and dry speculations about the nature of the Lord. So that's most important. Everything has to be done under guidance. And then he's saying how, yes, no one has to discover the nature of the Lord. It has already been spoken by the Lord himself in Bhagavad Gita, especially in all of the Vedic literatures. We have simply to accept them in toto and abide by the orders of the Lord. That will guide us to the path of perfection. One can remain in his own position. No one has to change his position, especially in this age of very great difficulties. The only condition is that one must give up the habit of dry speculation aimed at becoming one with the Lord. And after giving up such lofty, puffed up vanities. So this is basically the translation of this verse. Which one? Jnane prayasam udapasya namanta eva. So that is what he is giving up the speculation, habit of dry speculation. That is the lofty, puffed up vanities. Amazing. One may very submissively receive the orders of the Lord in Bhagavad Gita Bhagavatam from the lips of a bona fide devotee whose qualification is mentioned above. That will make everything successful without a doubt. Without a doubt. So we need to have full faith in this process that Srila Prabhupada has given. Prabhupada is giving the assurance that will make everything successful without a doubt. So, just this one purport, Prabhupada is giving the perfect formula for everyone. How to preach, how to practice, everything is there. Just in one purport. Such an amazing purport.
This converting unwilling man means that takes place.
So yes, initially everyone is unwilling. Na? You go out to preach. How many people come and say, "Sir, I was looking for you"? How many people come? Rarely maybe somebody is there like that. Others, most people say, "Why have you come here?" Correct? So, that is the nature of most people. Therefore, we have to preach. Okay, now next verse he is talking about. So, Narad Muni is telling one mantra which he received from. Which he received from the Bhakti. Just a minute. Okay, we'll first read the verse and then see the commentaries. Om Namo Bhagavate Tubhyam Vasudevaya Dhimahi Pradyumna Niruddhaya Namah Shankarshanaya Cha. Let us all chant the glories of Vasudeva along with his plenary expansions Pradyumna, Aniruddha and Shankarshan. In the third paragraph he writes, the purport is that any transaction either in the field of fruitive work or the empiric philosophy which is not ultimately aimed at transcendental realization of the Supreme Lord is considered to be useless. And towards the end he says, the most confidential part of the instruction is that one should always chant and remember the glories of the Lord Shri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, along with his different family portions expanded as Vasudeva and Krishna. Let's see one commentary on this. This is 38. Read this. This is 38. Huh?
37.
Huh?
We are reading 37.
Yeah, we are reading 37. This is 38. But it seems to be in connection to this only. Okay, let's read 38 also and then read this. Iti murtyabhidhanena mantra murtikam yajate yajna purusham sasamyak darshana puman. Thus he is the actual seer who worships in the form of transcendental sound representation the Supreme Personality of God Vishnu, who has no material form. So yes, as Prabhupada writes, our present senses are all made of material elements and therefore they are imperfect in realizing the transcendental form of Lord Vishnu. He is therefore worshipped by sound representation, by the transcendental method of chanting. Anything which is beyond the scope of experience by imperfect senses can be realized fully by the sound representation. And in the second paragraph he says, such sound should be received from the transcendental agency of the bona fide spiritual master, and the chanting may be practiced by the direction of the spiritual master. That will gradually lead us nearer to the Lord. Okay, read this commentary here.
One worships using the four names indicating the four forms, starting with Vasudeva. One should worship the Lord, who is the subject of the Dhyana mantra, Mantra Murti, with the 16 items of worship while uttering Vasudevaya Namaha, etc. According to the rules of Pancharatra. By chanting the mantra, the deity makes his appearance, or Mantra Murti means the deity whose body is mantra. The Lord does not have a material form, Amurtikam. Amurtikam can also mean that the Lord who is not hard, but rather soft with mercy. Amara Kosha says, Murti Katyanta Kayu. Murti means heart and body. Yajna Purusham means the Lord who should be worshipped. He is pleasant to behold. Samyak Darshanaha. This means that when others see that worshipper, they become successful. Or Darshanaha can mean knowledge. One who worships the Lord has complete knowledge. Or Darshana Chan means by which something is seen. That means scriptures which denotes bhakti, such as the Pancharatra, which is most wholesome, samyak, because it is satisfying to the soul. One who worships the Lord possesses the complete scriptural conclusion. This does not refer to scriptures devoid of bhakti, which are not wholesome but deficient.
Okay, fine. It's a little quite technical here. Okay, we'll go ahead. 39. O Brahmana, thus by the Supreme Lord Krishna I was endowed first with the transcendental knowledge of the Lord as inculcated in the confidential parts of the Vedas, then with spiritual opulences, and then with his intimate loving service. So here again Prabhupada is writing, communing with the Lord by transmission of the transcendental sound is not different from the whole spirit Lord Shri Krishna. It is a completely perfect method for approaching the Lord. By such pure contact with the Lord without offense of material conceptions, numbering 10, the devotee can rise above the material plane to understand the inner meaning of the Vedic literatures, including the Lord's existence in the transcendental realm. The Lord reveals his identity gradually to one who has unflinching faith, both in the spiritual master and in the Lord. After this, the devotees enter with mystic opulence, which is 8 in number. And above all, the devotee is accepted in the confidential entourage of the Lord and is entrusted with specific service of the Lord through the agency of the spiritual master. A pure devotee is more interested in serving the Lord than in showing an exhibition of mystic powers dormant in him. Srinatha has explained all these from his personal experience, and one can obtain all the facilities which Sri Narada obtained by perfecting the chanting process of the sound representing the Lord. There is no bar for chanting this transcendental sound by anyone, provided it is received through Narada's representative, coming down by chain of disciplic succession of the parampara system. And the last verse. Tvamapyalabhra shruta vishrutam vibho samapyate yena vidham bhutsitam pratyaya yukyer muhularvitatmanam sanklesha nirvanam shanti namyatha. Please therefore describe the Almighty Lord's activities which you have learned by your vast knowledge of the Vedas, for that will satisfy the hankerings of great learned men and at the same time mitigate the miseries of the masses of common people who are always suffering from material pangs. Indeed, there is no other way to get out of such miseries. So again, he is requesting Vyasdev, please describe the Lord's activities. So then, so your own miseries will be mitigated and the miseries of the common people also mitigated. Prabhupada is talking about the 4 types of devotees who surrender and 4 who do not surrender. Sri Naraji advised Vyasadeva to describe the devotees of the Lord just to do good to all 8 classes of men, both good and bad. Srimad Bhagavatam is therefore not meant for any particular class of men or sects. It is for the sincere soul who actually wants his own welfare and peace of mind. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the first canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam entitled Narada's Instructions in Srimad Bhagavatam for Vyasadeva. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Radha Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Sambhita Gaur Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Thank you very much. So once again,